Let's get more now from that G20 summit in Washington. We can speak to Danny Leipziger, the World Bank's Vice President for Poverty Reduction and Economic Management. He joins us from there now. Good evening to you. A huge challenge for 20 different countries, 20+ different countries with different agendas. How optimistic are you that something could be set in train now to actually tackle this global crisis?
Well, I think it's a very important first step to get the new group of important economic players in the room to talk about this crisis. I think we also have to recognize that there are many countries affected by the crisis that were not in the room. So from the vantage point of the World Bank, we're obviously concerned that the prospects for developing countries going forward look difficult, and we hope that the kinds of steps coming out of this summit and going forward will help reduce a bit the problems that developing countries across the globe will suffer from.
And what are those specific problems in the pipeline for developing countries?
Well, I think as you know, countries around the world were suffering already from the food problems, food price increases, fuel price increases, now the financial crisis, which is causing difficulties in terms of access to trade credits, so trade volumes are down. Remittances are down, and now the battlefield has shifted from the financial sector to the real economy, and prospects for 2009 are for very low growth and therefore impacts on developing countries that rely on exports in order to begin to drive their economies forward. So these are issues that we hope the G20 will address.
So how important is it, for example, the Doha round of world trade talks can be agreed, can be clarified as soon as possible?
Well, we believe this is of paramount importance because particularly in a global slowdown where you will see price discounting and difficulties in domestic economies, there's a great chance of protectionism coming back. So we think that the global trade talks were close to a satisfactory conclusion, and we would urge that countries get back to the negotiating table and get this done.
Some commentators are comparing today's meeting, the start of a process, and they're comparing it to Bretton Woods back at the end of the Second World War, when, of course, the IMF was set up, your World Bank as well. I mean, do you think that there are questions to be asked about the structure of the IMF and the World Bank now, and reform needed?
Well, there's no doubt that the constellation of economic power is different now than it was in the post-war period. I think the institution adjusted a bit. The World Bank, for example, has made some changes in its voting structure, and now developing countries account for almost half of our voting. But more can be done to reflect the current realities. I think globalization has created a different constellation of important players, and both the IMF and the World Bank have instituted commissions, in the case of the World Bank, under the auspices of ex-President Zedillo of Mexico, to take a look at the World Bank and see where we can make further reforms.
And just briefly, what role do you see for China, for Russia, for India in this new global economic landscape?
Well, I think there are many roles. We've seen now China taking the lead, for example, in terms of its fiscal stimulus, and I think we would like to see other countries around the world join in a coordinated fiscal stimulus, which is absolutely required. They also, a number of countries have significant reserves. The World Bank, for example, has programs that we've instituted to try to help in the areas of trade finance, bank recapitalization of smaller banks, and in countries such as China could be very helpful in providing some of their reserves to be recycled to those that are in need of greater credit in these very tight markets, which are squeezing out the poorer borrowers and causing great distress in the developing world.
Okay, Danny Leipziger, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. Danny Leipziger, Vice President for Poverty Reduction and Economic Management of the World Bank. Now here, energy companies